Hello everyone. Let's start with UGC NET Political Science, Unit Political Tradition, and the topic Liberalism, the philosophy of freedom and rational progress. So liberalism, the ideology, was born during the struggle against feudal operation, religious absolutism, and monarchical despotism. Herein, liberalism rose as a force that advocate reason, rights, and reform. So, all in all, liberalism is a saga of enlightenment, and enlightenment was a reaction against feudalism, and feudalism was the characteristic of medieval age, and medieval age has the overall aura that belonged to unscientific religious dogmatism. All in all, the medieval period, it was infested with everything that can be associated with any religion, any negative connotation that we found usually in many religions across the earth, such as superstition, dark faith. So the medieval period was, in religious and scientific term, was a dark age that found its semblance in superstition, unrationality, non-rationality, and absolute faith. So that was the time, that was the situation. फिर religions की बात तो पढ़ी. Now let's talk about social and political feudalism. Political feudalism. So feudalism as a system, as an organized system, is it about revenue collection and governance, and it's a very simple thing if you can see that way. Up same system you can find the same replica in India. So here a large county or large empire, it is divided among many small principalities. Each one is given to a trusted member of family or trusted member of nobility. अब उस nobility में से जो भी person होता है like a minister or a prince or governor, और उसको particular piece of land दिया. Now the king want two things. First, revenue, and second, security. So both of these things, they work in a hierarchical manner. Here, minister, he has divided this piece of land among many vassals, many feudal lords, and those feudal lords, they provided these two things that was necessary to maintain an empire. The first, they provided revenue and the security element. So this was how the whole feudalism or feudal system, both in political and social system, worked. Well, the system was inherently oppressive. ऐसे इसलिए कि उस टाइम पे राइट्स liberalism, liberal principle, equality, and all these modern ideas, they did not hold any ground, did not hold any value. And as I have told you, rationality, reason, reforms were not there. So nobody can question if they got any right, if they were given any equal footing. So the feudal operation dimension has been addressed. Religious absolutism, which means religious stand supreme, church held the supreme power, the not only the supreme but hegemonic influence, and people dare not question it. And then comes the monarchical despotism, who was a linchpin who worked with both these apparatus. First, the feudal operation of the feudal lords, their authority, all of them, they were inherently or unquestionably linked to a monarch. And then the religious dogmas, religious absolutism, and the hegemonic authority of people church, both of them, they served the interest of monarch, and monarch played with both of them. And absolutely, monarch himself was a despot, an inherently oppressive person. So against all this background, enlightenment, it act as a bloom that dispelled the dark ages of feudalism and brought reason, rights, and reform. Now, the historical origins, the seeds of liberal thought. So, the roots of liberalism can be traced back to European Enlightenment of 17th and 18th century. And as the name suggests, Enlightenment, और मैं कब से जो है ये बार बार Enlightenment में ये actually ये एक आदत हो चुकी है all the time. I don't know why, but maybe some issue. But European Enlightenment, as the name suggests, it is about providing light against the dark ages of medieval period. So this era, it was characterized by strong belief in reason, in scientific inquiry, and in the capacity of human beings to improve themselves. These were the foundations upon which the Europeans brought enlightenment upon themselves and dispelled a doom that hanged over them. And thinkers like John Locke, Montesquieu, Voltaire, and Immanuel Kant, they deeply influenced liberal ideas. In the words of John Locke, who led the foundation of intellectualism at that time, so in his two treatises of government, he argued that individuals possess natural rights, rights that are inherent by virtue of being human. So these rights are not granted by kings or government, they are not dependent on divinity. They are inherently there because we are born as human. And he also introduced the idea of consent of the governed, consent of the people. So if something is given to, something is implemented, or something is enforced on people, then their consent is necessary. And he also talked about limited government, that the state, it should be limited in its approach. State cannot be and should not be absolute. And all these ideas emphasize that rulers derive authority from people. People do not derive authority from rulers or any um, divine religion. Then, in words of Montesquieu, his theory of separation of power, it became another pillar of liberalism, which suggested that dividing political authority among executive, legislative, and judicial branches would safeguard liberty. And in words of Voltaire, who passionately defended freedom of speech and religious tolerance, both these qualities are fundamental to liberal society. Now, the core principles and beliefs of liberalism. First, primacy of the individual. So, for liberalism, individual forms the basic unit, and that individual should be endowed with rights and dignity, and those rights, those dignities must be respected and protected. Then liberalism is based on another strong pillar known as rationalism. So humans are rational beings capable of reasoned debate, self-governance, and moral progress. And those who do not know what rationalism means, rationalism, it has a root word known as ratio. And अगर आप लोगों को अपने स्कूल लाइफ याद हो, ratio is about uh, judging two values. So ultimately, where the ratio in mathematical principle, it is about like in what ratio water and milk is in any container, and the answer would be either one ratio two or one ratio three or two ratio three. All these things in political and intellectual tradition, it is they do not talk about mathematical equation. All they talk about is the judgment that we are mathematically arriving at a conclusion. So rationality or rationalism in political and intellectualism, it is about the mathematical, the analytical judgment, the reason. Let's go the reason both there. So rationalism, it says that human beings are rational beings. They can judge, they can analyze at, they can arrive at a conclusion in an empirical way, and they are capable of reasoned debate, but providing reasons and arguing in favor and against. And they are also capable of self-governance and moral progress. क्योंकि अगर वो, if they are capable of rationality, capable of reasoned debate, then self-governance and moral progress, इसके लिए सोचने की जरूरत नहीं है. Then the third pillar of liberalism is a consent and popular sovereignty. So the government, it must be based on consent of the government, consent of the governed, the people, not divine right or hereditary privilege. And popular sovereignty, it means that sovereignty, the right to rule, it is with the people. Then next is rule of law, that no one is above law, and laws must be fair, ethical, law must be public, and they should be equally applied and equally enforceable. And the fifth pillar is protection of rights. Here the rights are given civil liberties such as freedom of speech, religion, assembly, of occupation, of property. They are inviolable. Inviolable means they cannot be violated. They form the basis upon which human can live a meaningful life, and they should be protected at any cost. And the sixth pillar is limited government, that the power of state it must be restricted so that tyranny, tyranny or dictatorship can be prevented. Next comes the free market economy. So economic freedom or providing equal economic opportunity that also include right to own property and engage in voluntary exchange. All of such market dynamics, they are essential for individual liberty. So this emphasis of liberalism on individuals' moral and political primacy, it provided a break from collectivist structure of feudal society. Now the evolution of idea of liberalism from classical to modern forms. The first step in the ladder of evolution is classical liberalism from 17th to 19th century. So here, thinker like Adam Smith and Jeremy Bentham, by their respective works, The Wealth of Nations and An Introduction to the Principle of Morals and Legislation, they are associated with this phase. And here, the key principle of this phase was minimal state intervention, which means that the state role it was mainly to protect private property and enforce contract. And the second principle was the market economy. It should be driven by self-interest and competition. And third principle, political liberalism, which was influenced by Locke, it emphasized constitutional government, civil right, and representative democracy. So this classical phase was the first phase of evolution of liberalism, and both American Declaration of Independence and the French Revolution, both are expressions of these classical liberal ideas. Now, let now move on to the second step in the evolutionary ladder. So here, second step is modern or welfare liberalism from late 19th to 20th century. So as industrialization unfolded, many problems such as poverty, child labor, urban slum, and economic exploitation began to come up. And the solutions were found in the words of many thinkers. First, T.H. Green, who argued that mere absence of restraint was not enough. True freedom means enabling individuals to realize their potential, and in that way, these social ills they can be overcome. Then John Stuart Mill, by his work on liberty, he defended individual freedom, but also emphasized the need for social reform so that economic domination can be prevented. Now, before proceeding on to the third thinker, let me give you an idea of industrial revolution. कि उसके बिना all of these things, these explanations will sound hollow. So industrial revolution, it was about mass production, and mass consumption, because something can be produced in mass number only if many people are eager to buy it. Otherwise, अगर कोई खरीदने वाला नहीं है और फैक्ट्रियां बनाई जा रही है तो फिर उन चीज़ों की कोई वैल्यू नहीं है. So this is was a manifestation of people's consumption needs, और जैसे जैसे consumption needs बढ़ती गई, things needed to be produced in mass numbers. And then base, the platform for industrial revolution was provided by both Enlightenment and the subsequent scientific revolution. साइंटिफिक रेवोल्यूशन में बहुत सारे इन्वेंशंस हुए, जैसे थॉमस एल्वा एडिसन का नाम सुना होगा आपने. तो ही आल्सो invented around 1,000 patents, 1,000 things. So he had 1,000 patents in his name. तो ऐसे करके उस टाइम पे बहुत सारे इन्वेंशंस हुए, बहुत सारी डिस्कवरीज हुई. डीजल इंजन हो गया, um, और क्या एग्जांपल दे, फ्रॉम पेन टू एरोप्लेन्स, everything can be traced to the industrial revolution. तो उस टाइम पे industrial revolution, it started producing things in mass number. जब ये चीजें प्रोड्यूस होने लगी, जो उससे जस्ट पहले की सोसाइटी है, विच वाज सेल्फ सफिशिएंट इन इट्स टर्म, कि टॉयल ऑन समवन्स फील्ड, फिर उससे जो प्रोड्यूस है, जस्ट अर्न योर wages and live your happy life. Most of the people, they were agrarian. Most of the villages, they were agriculturally self-sufficient. इस तरह से सोसाइटी थी. Mass production and consumption or urbanization, modernization, technological progress, these things were not there. तो जब ये चीजें आई, तो इसके साथ ही the divides started getting bigger. Divides, technological divide, urbanization divide, consumption divide, educational divide, और उन्हीं divide के साथ ही poverty, child labor, urban slum, economic exploitation, capitalism, the greed of capitalism, ये सब चीजें जो है धीरे धीरे सामने आने लगी. So the welfare liberalism, it is an answer, the second step in the evolution of liberalism. It is known as welfare liberalism. So welfare liberalism is a response to the ills of industrial evolution. So that's why in that background, Mill emphasized need for social reform. Because if social reforms are there, social reforms means reforms in social sector, such as education, in healthcare indices, in provision of basic necessities. So if these things can be provided, if a solid base can be built and can be sustained, then such economic domination can be prevented. And the idea of welfare state. So here state or the government, they were seen as necessary to provide such social things such as education, healthcare, pension, and regulate working conditions so that uh, a solid base can be created. Because if you can provide the basic necessities, if the state can provide the basic necessities, then to enter the competition or not, to consume or not, to progress or not, and to progress up to how much extent, all these things, they then depend on people. And this solid background, it act as some fallback option. कि कोई entrepreneur है, if he is like a entrepreneur from a poor background, and even if he's risking everything, even he's risking his whole saving, the saving of his family, the gold that is saved by his family, सबको risk करके he is pushing for a startup. तो ऐसे में एक कोई फॉल बैक ऑप्शन हो कि चलो मिनिमल कंडीशन तो होगी, इवन इफ द स्टार्टअप फेल्स, तो ऐसे में कोई भी रिस्क लेने को तैयार हो सकता है. So this ingenuity could have progress society manifold if the welfare state, it found right leverage on the right time. For example, after Second World War, the Beveridge Report in Britain, it led the foundation of modern welfare state, and it started talking about five evils of five giants, such as want, disease, ignorance, squalor, and idleness. And all of these giants or evils, they are associated with the modern economic ills of industrial revolution. And the third phase is neoliberalism from late 20th century to present. So, in response to the economic stagnation and crisis of the 1970s, thinkers like Milton Friedman and Friedrich Hayek, they criticized excessive state intervention. Unke according, because the 1970s was a situation in which the US, it engulfed itself into Vietnam War, where बहुत सारी जो countries हैं, especially the newly independent country, all of them, they were working on protectionist scenario, and most of the global economy, it was stagnating. I mean, it did halt. It start it stopped progressing, it stopped expanding. So at that time, these neoliberalists like Milton Friedman, Hayek, they said excessive state intervention or state interference, it was not necessary, and maybe ये state intervention ही है जो stagnation का main कारण है. And here they advocated a return to free market policies, deregulation, and privatization. So free market policies, it means the intervention of state is as minimal as possible. Deregulation means the as less regulations as possible. Privatization means the major industry they should be divested to the private players. So these are the key principle of neoliberalism. And neoliberalism it also shape policies of two political giants such as Margaret Thatcher in the UK and Ronald Reagan in the US. And even uh, the LPG reforms that were initiated in India after the BOP crisis, they were also heavily influenced by neoliberal thinking. Now, the major criticism of liberalism. So, first such criticism is Marxist, who argue that liberalism it ignores class conflict and economic exploitation. It promises formal equality because it is talking about liberal principles, but substantive equality means equality in real term is not there. As long as class conflict is there, as long as free market principle, less state intervention, these things are there, then the working class would be exploited forever. And as long as working classes are exploited, real equality cannot be achieved. So these were the arguments given by the Marxist. Then, in the terms of communitarian like Michael Sandel and Charles Tyler, they argue that liberalism overlooks the importance of community traditions and shared values, and communitarian can be equated with the holders of conservative values. So they care more about the cultural dimension, and that is important, but that is what criticism is. And feminist, they argue that liberalism it keep focusing on male citizens and figure like Mary Wollstonecraft by her work A Vindication of Rights of Women. She pushed for women's rights in liberal discourse in the whole dictionary of liberalism. Then post-colonial theorists like Franz Fanon and Edward Said, they highlighted that liberalism it may be professing, it may be advocating for universal rights, for liberal principle, but it also smells of the colonial domination. An ecologist, the question that liberalism's emphasis on human-centered progress or the technological progress, it would contribute to environmental degradation. Now, the contemporary challenges of liberalism was populism. So, in the modern time, there are leaders who claim that they are speaking for the true people, that they are holding the nerves of people. But while gaining power, they become majoritarian, authoritarian, and keep attacking liberal institution and liberal institutions like independent board, free media, civil society, even the institutions of democracy. Then the second challenge is inequality. तो the liberalism's principle शुरू से हमने देखा जो तीनों evolution के ladders हैं all of have same thing that it is the economic freedom, economic prosperity that can provide true liberty to human. So in short, they are they are giving too much primacy to the economic dimension. So if economy or if money is given that much primacy, then the economic inequality is going to rise. So, and that's what thing in capitalist society where economic inequality is rising, and it leads to question whether liberalism can deliver its promise of the principle it talks about. And the next thing, technological surveillance. So when tech giants and state surveillance measures are increasing, recently आप लोगों ने वो सुना होगा जो इजरायली सॉफ्टवेयर जो था जो बहुत सारे लोगों के फोन में इंस्टॉल कर दिया था पेगासस सॉफ्टवेयर सो इससे जो सर्वेलेंस के है द इशू ऑफ प्राइवेसी एंड फ्रीडम दे हैव back to the forefront. And finally, the next final challenge is about cultural conflict. So there are debates over immigration, multiculturalism, and national identity that test liberal commitment to tolerance and pluralism. Because as the world is reproducing and they are immigrants, they are refugees, and people, they are moving across borders. And if immigrants or emigrants, whoever country they are going into or coming out of. If they are not behave well, and if the whole dimension, the whole scenario is different, in both the cases, the liberal idea of tolerance or peaceful coexistence is it comes into question. It's like, okay, आपको immigrants पसंद नहीं है, but then you talk about peaceful coexistence. So it was what you said. It is not just that you should behave that way. And multiculturalism. So when immigration is rising, when people, because of globalization, they are intermixing. So different people जो है अलग अलग diversity के अलग अलग cultures के, they are coexisting and they are intermingling. ऐसे में multiculturalism, it should be a hallmark of the modern age. But लेकिन multiculturalism के बीच में भी अभी they are uh, newer hierarchies, or newer separation, newer discrimination that are coming into picture. And finally, about national identity, especially the majority identity, majoritarianism, about the discrimination against minorities. So all these things, they are testing the liberalist ideas of tolerance and pluralism. So this is it. बाकी कुछ ऐसा क्वेश्चन है जो मैंने नहीं किया, that I might have skipped, please drop comments, and I'll keep recording videos for UGC Political Science, uh, and I'll try my best to meet the June deadline. बस आप लोगों से रिक्वेस्ट है कि कीप सब्सक्राइबिंग टू इट, आपके फ्रेंड्स वगैरह हैं उनको भी आप बताइए. That's it. Thanks again.